Mary, a frontier romance novella. The Wyoming Territory had a way of humbling a person. The wind carried grit, judgment, and cold in equal measure, and it never hesitated to cut straight through anyone who didn't belong. Mary Walker, at 28, had learned all too painfully that she did not belong. People in town saw her the way they saw a mule, broad, sturdy, useful, but nothing to admire. Plain, they called her, though they rarely stopped there. Heavy woman. Short thing. No wonder she ain't married. They flung those comments like children skipping stones, carelessly, repeatedly, never thinking they might bruise where they landed. Mary had tried not to listen, but words could be heavier than any flour sack she lifted in the saloon kitchen. Her parents had died on the wagon trail 10 years before, leaving her alone in a world that made no room for softness, especially not the kind she carried in her heart. With no family and no prospects, the saloon was the only place that would hire her. She cooked for men who would not look her in the eyes, but had no trouble shouting crude jabs the moment she stepped outside. But she survived. She worked. She lived small. Her little cottage at the edge of town was barely a single room, but at least it was quiet, especially in the evenings, when the soft nicker of horses drifted across from the livery. Horses had never looked at her with disdain. They simply accepted her, and sometimes that was more kindness than she got from people. And then there was a father and his young daughter who came into town every week on their buckboard. Mary never spoke to them, only observed from her window. The girl would chatter endlessly at her father, who listened with a tired but fond expression. They seemed whole, loved. Mary watched them more closely than she wished to admit. She told herself she didn't envy them, but she did. She wanted someone, anyone, to look at her as if she mattered. June baked the town in relentless heat. The saloon kitchen felt like a furnace stuffed inside an oven, and by the time Mary finished work, she could hardly breathe. The creek called to her. She walked the hidden path, hoping for solitude, the only place she could shed the heaviness of the day. But as she approached the water, she saw a girl curled on the bank, shoulders trembling with quiet sobs. The girl from the buckboard. Mary hesitated. Instinct told her to retreat. People rarely welcomed her presence, but something in the child's posture, lonely, fragile, pulled her forward. She knelt softly. "Sweetheart, are you hurt?" The girl startled, wiping her eyes. I'm sorry. I didn't hear you." "That's all right," Mary offered a small warm smile. "What's your name?" "Alice," she sniffled. "I'm Mary. Would you like to tell me what's wrong?" Alice hesitated, then her voice wavered. "My dog died last night." "Oh, honey." Mary's hand gently touched her back. "I'm so sorry. Papa's so busy I didn't want to cry in front of him." Mary swallowed the ache welling in her chest. She knew too well what it meant to cry alone. "Well, you can cry here," she said. "I won't mind." Alice's small chin trembled. "Maybe I'll tell him tonight." "I think he would like that." Alice sniffed. "Why are you here?" "To cool off." Mary slipped off her shoes. The heat was unbearable today. "Can I cool off too?" Mary smiled. "Of course." They dangled their feet in the water, and Alice began to talk. Oh, how she talked about school, ranch life, horses, cats, and every frog that had ever jumped into the creek. Mary listened, for listening was the one skill she had that the world could not take from her. For the first time in years, she laughed. Not politely, not quietly, genuinely. When the sun dipped low, Alice hugged her tightly before running back toward town. Mary sat long after she left, feet in the water, heart stirred by something dangerously close to hope. The days moved strangely after that, slow at work, quick in anticipation. Mary found herself smiling at the thought of Alice's chatter. She told herself not to be foolish, but even quiet lives deserved a bit of joy. Alice came again, and again. They talked beneath the shade near Mary's cottage, or sheltered from the rain inside her little home. Alice never commented on the cottage's sparseness, the near-empty cupboards, or the pathetic pile of twigs Mary called firewood. She simply accepted Mary's world unfiltered. One rainy afternoon, Alice said, "You don't have much firewood." Mary flushed. "I'll gather more. I'll manage." And Alice, bless her, simply nodded, concern softening her young features. Mary taught her to sew, to crochet, to braid her hair. They played marbles. They cooked stew together on days Mary could afford the ingredients. Alice filled the cottage with laughter, sound that warmed the walls better than any stove. John, the father, soon noticed. He asked around quietly. What he heard angered him. The general store owner called Mary the fat woman and admitted she barely bought enough food to live on. The livery owner said she cooked at the saloon because no one else would hire someone like her. John didn't like what he heard. He liked even less how people spoke about her, as if she were a cautionary tale instead of a human being. And every time Alice pointed toward Mary's cottage as they rode home, John felt a tightening in his chest. He didn't know why at first, but he would soon. Autumn arrived early, sharp and cold. Mary's firewood pile barely grew. She scraped by, eating less so she could buy Alice a little treat every now and then, a spool of thread, a scrap of lace. One afternoon, as Mary walked home from work, she found a man standing at her door. She froze. It was John. He turned, hat in hand. "Miss Mary, may I come in?" Her heart hammered. Of course. Inside, he looked around her cottage, eyes soft, not judging, simply seeing. "I came to thank you," he said, "for what you've done for Alice. She's laughed more in the past months than she has in years." Mary swallowed. "She's no trouble. I enjoy her company." "You've taught her to cook, sew, and tend a home," he said. "Things she hasn't had since her mother passed." Mary's cheeks warmed. "I'm glad to help." He hesitated, clearing his throat. "I've also learned about your circumstances." She stiffened. "There's nothing to pity." "It isn't pity," he said firmly. He took a breath. "I've come with a proposition, and I ask that you hear all of it before you answer." Mary froze. "I am suggesting," he paused, gathering courage, "that we marry." The world tilted. Mary's breath caught painfully. He continued quickly. "I raise Alice alone. She needs a woman's gentle guidance, and you need warmth, safety, and a home. We would keep separate rooms. A marriage of convenience, nothing more. You'd have food, comfort, and protection from the town's gossip. In return, you'd help with Alice and the household. I have a housekeeper, Mrs. Hull. She can help you with the household chores." Mary stared at him, stunned. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Finally, she whispered, "Why marry? Why not hire me?" "Because people in this town are vicious," he said bitterly. "They'd talk if you lived under my roof unmarried. They'd tear you apart and hurt Alice in the process." Mary looked around her tiny cottage, her thin quilt, the bare shelves, the pitiful wood pile. Her stomach growled in betrayal. She met his eyes. "I will marry you." Within an hour, Mary quit her job at the saloon and packed her meagre belongings. She met John at the parsonage, where the preacher married them with little ceremony. When the preacher instructed John to kiss the bride, he gently kissed Mary's cheek, soft, respectful, careful. Mary felt warmth spread beneath her skin, but when they stepped outside, the town swarmed with gossip. Faces peered from windows. People whispered behind gloved hands. "Do you regret marrying me?" Mary whispered, voice cracking. John shook his head. "Not for a moment. Let them talk. I know your worth, even if they don't." Somehow that was the moment Mary began to fall in love. John's ranch took Mary's breath away, a beautiful two-story home with green shutters, a porch swing, a kitchen larger than her entire cottage, cupboards stocked with more food than she had ever seen at once, a sitting room with rocking chairs and a fireplace. He showed her upstairs. "This room is yours," he said gently. The room had lace curtains and a soft yellow quilt. Mary ran her fingers over the fabric, overwhelmed. They walked to the barn next, 10 stalls, horses gleaming in the dim afternoon light, a loft full of hay. Alice burst in, dragging her pony and grinning wide, until she saw Mary beside her father. "What are you doing here?" the girl squealed. John knelt. "Alice! Mary and I married today. She'll be staying with us and helping with you." Alice threw herself into Mary's arms with a joyful cry. Mary held her tightly, tears pressing behind her eyes. She had never been welcomed with such pure, unquestioning love. They settled into a rhythm. Mary cooked, cleaned lightly, and tended the home with Mrs. Hull's help. Alice came home from school, eager to sew, to bake, to learn. Mary found herself humming as she worked, her steps lighter, her nights warmer. John trained horses all day in the barn, his strong hands and patient voice coaxing trust from even the most stubborn stallion. Mary often watched him from the kitchen window. She didn't mean to, but her eyes found him anyway. The way he moved, the way sunlight caught in his hair, the way he paused sometimes as if sensing her gaze. Meals were quiet but warm. John thanked her every evening as if she'd performed a miracle, not cooked a simple meal. She began to look forward to his voice, his presence, his nearness, and something within her, buried long ago, slowly stirred awake. One afternoon, Alice came home furious. "Jeremy said you're not my real mama," she blurted. "He said you only married Papa because you didn't want to be a spinster. He said you're too fat for anyone to marry except Papa needing help." Mary's heart clenched, but she smiled gently. "Alice, sweet girl, I married your father for you, yes, but also because I wanted a home, and because your father is a good man." She cupped Alice's cheek. "As for my being fat, well, it's true. People have always judged me for it. They shouldn't," Alice protested fiercely. "No," Mary said softly, "they shouldn't." Alice hugged her tightly. "I'm glad you're here." Mary held her, eyes closed. She wondered then, quietly, painfully, whether John saw her as anything more than a helper, whether he could. It happened one noon when John came in for lunch, dusting sweat from his brow. Mary placed a bowl of stew before him, and he looked up with a smile that landed warm and deep in her chest. "You look pleased with yourself," she said lightly. "I completed training a difficult stallion today, and the owner paid handsomely." "That's wonderful." He studied her for a long, quiet moment. "I was thinking perhaps we could use the extra money on something together. A new stove? A phonograph? Or add a room onto the house?" Mary's breath caught. "You said we." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Yes," John said. "We're husband and wife." "We were married for convenience," she said, "so I could help raise Alice." "That may have been the beginning." His voice grew hushed. "But it's not how I see us now." Mary's world tipped again, but this time with something warm and dizzying. "If you ever find it in your heart," John swallowed. "Mary, I want to know you as a real wife, not just a helper. I want." His voice broke before he steadied it. "I want you." Mary's breath shuddered. Tears gathered. "John, I've loved you for months." He stood slowly, stepping close. Close enough that she felt the warmth of him, the faint scent of horses and clean sweat. His fingers brushed her cheek, hesitating, asking. She leaned into the touch. Their first kiss was tender, slow, searching. The second was deeper, an ache answering an ache. When Alice unwittingly walked in moments later and fled with a grin, Mary and John broke into laughter, foreheads pressed together, breath mingling. That night, Mary moved into John's room. They undressed with nervous hands and trembling breaths. John's fingers traced her cheek, her shoulders, her waist, soft touches that asked nothing and cherished everything. Mary, shy but yearning, reached for him in return. Their intimacy was warm, slow, reverent, no fear, no mockery, only two lonely hearts finally allowed to belong. Afterward, he held her close against his chest, his face buried in her hair. "I'm not letting you go," he whispered, and Mary finally believed she was wanted. Spring came with blooming flowers and with sickness. Mary felt tired one afternoon in the garden. Mrs. Hull noticed her pallor, but Mary dismissed it. That night, a headache bloomed behind her eyes, then a fever. By morning, she could barely wake. John's strong hands shook as he tried to rouse her. "Sweetheart, wake up, please." The days blurred. Fever dreams tore through her mind. Townspeople jeering, shadows pulling her down, a hot, suffocating haze pressing against her limbs. John brought the doctor, who frowned gravely. "It's scarlet fever, John. Bad." "Will she survive?" A long, heavy silence. "I don't believe so." John broke. He prayed beside her bed. He begged. He cooled her forehead with trembling hands. He whispered memories of the clothes swaying on the clothesline, of the rooster she'd scared off, of the first time she laughed in his kitchen. He crawled into bed and held her as if his body alone could anchor her spirit. Mary drifted between fire and darkness. A soft, glowing light beckoned, a painless place. She stepped toward it, but as she reached the edge, memories returned. Alice's laughter, John's hands, John's voice saying, "I want you," John holding her as if she were precious. She turned away from the light. The pain returned, but so did life. John awoke to the faintest stirring beside him. Mary's eyes opened, soft, exhausted, but aware. "John," she whispered, touching his cheek, "you're my love." John wept openly, freely. The fever had broken. It took weeks for Mary to walk again. When Alice returned home, she flew into Mary's arms, crying and laughing at once. "I missed you, Mama!" Mary held her tight, heart overflowing. Outside, John watched them with tenderness in his eyes, the kind that said everything he felt but rarely spoke. He stepped forward, wrapping an arm around Mary's waist, drawing her gently into his side. "You came back to us," he murmured. Mary leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling his warmth, his steadiness, his love. "Yes," she whispered, "I did." By early summer, the ranch burst with life. Horses prancing, garden thriving, Alice racing her pony through the fields. Mary stood on the porch one evening, the sunset painting gold across her skin. John stepped behind her, arms slipping around her waist, lips brushing her temple. "My beautiful Mary," he whispered. She closed her eyes, leaning into him. She had once believed the world had no place for her. She had once believed she would never be loved. But here, in John's arms, with Alice chattering inside and the scent of wild sage drifting through the air, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. Wanted, cherished, home.